Should Robert Pattinson's Batman be the Batman for the DCU? CBR just recently wrote an article that is sort of saying, look, the DCU should not make the same mistake that the DCEU made with The Dark Knight, Christian Bale, that trilogy there, when they started their universe. Now, if we take a look at this article here, you can see the DCU can avoid the DCU's earliest mistake by embracing Robert Pattinson's Batman. Now, obviously, Robert Pattinson wasn't the Batman back in 2013 when Man of Steel came out. But if we take a look at that time, when Man of Steel released, they weren't necessarily looking at a grander universe of sorts. You know, they had their Dark Knight trilogy. They had their Batman trilogy, which The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises were billion-dollar films. And there was no reason that Warner Brothers didn't think that Man of Steel at the time wasn't going to make near or close to $1 billion. They weren't necessarily thinking grand universe. Sure, they wanted a piece of that pie. They wanted, take a look at what came out in 2012 with the Avengers, another billion-dollar movie. It was the superhero boom. That is what was going on. The comic book movies were going huge at the time. But when they signed on and talked to Zack Snyder about making a sequel, and then all the ideas started coming in, like, how do we make a Superman movie bigger? Because honestly, when you take a look at how Man of Steel was, and it only made, what did it make? It was just around $650 million. Like, how can we make this movie bigger? How can we get it bigger? They talked about bringing in Batman. And absolutely, discussions were made. How can we get this bigger? And we know that Christian Bale was sort of done with Batman at that time. He's often said that he would have returned or would return as Batman, but only with Christopher Nolan. We know that Nolan did help usher in Man of Steel. He helped with the story and the script alongside David Goyer with Man of Steel. We know that Christopher Nolan is a big part of the reason, and he's the one that chose Zack Snyder to make Man of Steel. But was it really a mistake to not continue with Christian Bale in that regard? I don't think it was. I think they had to differentiate themselves because at this point in time, they wanted to establish and create a new world. And, Man of Steel, while it was still a little grounded, the Dark Knight trilogy and, everything they did with Christian Bale, that was, they really kind of finished off his arc. There was not much more to say or to do with that version of Batman. And bringing him back, bringing him into this universe, would have just kind of felt meh. It wouldn't have felt really, really great. Would we have all been excited? Absolutely. But would I sit there and say that it was a mistake that they made with the DCEU? No, I wouldn't say it was a mistake. Now, is it a mistake that they don't take Robert Pattinson's Batman and bring him into the DCU? Well, that's another question. That's something I think completely different from what happened in the early years of the DCEU. Because, granted, the Batman made, $750 million? It wasn't an overly huge hit. I mean, it didn't struggle at the box office, but a lot of people didn't enjoy this movie. It wasn't as big as the Nolan Batman films. But it also came out during this time where comic book movies have been struggling. I mean, your biggest comic book movie as of late was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That movie didn't break $900 million. It was like 880, 870, 890, somewhere around there. It didn't break $900 million. So it made a decent amount of money. But still, even a diehard Batman fan like myself, I'm not a big fan of what Reeves and Pattinson was doing or have been doing with that. Then again, it did make a decent chunk of money. Now, according to some reports, James Gunn did have a talk with Matt Reeves. And I'm sure those talks probably even got to Robert Pattinson. And I'm sure they discussed the idea and the possibility of weaving in this Batman within the DCU. Now, according to those reports, Matt Reeves wanted to continue doing his own thing. And that was actually a big part of Matt Reeves signing on to do these Batman movies a number of years ago. Remember, this was before James Gunn took over the DCU, before he was head of DC Studios. This was under Walter Hamada. DeLuca, Abdi, all of them were running DC and doing DC movies. When he took over doing a Batman franchise, he wanted it separate. He didn't want to be stuck in with a universe. And that's kind of what he was promised. He would be allowed to do his own thing. So to then come in, and James Gunn come in, and he, talked to him and said, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to be part of it? And he said no. And that's fine. That was up to, look, he doesn't have to. But keep in mind, that doesn't mean that they have to continue his universe. They could, at some point, just end the Batman universe if it's not performing as it should. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could. But they gave him the option. I don't think they should pull Pattinson in, personally. I don't think they should. Again, I'm a little biased because I'm not a big fan of the Pattinson Batman. But I also don't think they should. Now, I get this article because the article goes on, and it does say some pretty interesting things, like that the DCU does need a win quickly. And it's not wrong. It does need a win quickly, and the fact that the Batman, the first movie, or that movie, made $700 and some odd million dollars, is a decent win. And it's already established. And people could already find their way in. But, I beg to differ. It's okay. You don't need to have that right away. You don't need to have that $750 million right away. You can have Superman make that $600-700 million in 2025 to start off the DCU. And they're also saying, the age is just 7 years between Pattinson and Cornsweet, which is different from the 11 years between Cavill and Affleck. Again, it is what it is. The age gap between Pattinson and Cornsweet, we don't know what the age gap is going to be between the DCU's Batman and Cornsweet. It could be 2 years. It could be 1 year. They could be the same age. It could be 10 years. We don't exactly know what it's going to be yet. They try to push the idea that the Batman was the last successful DC film for Warner Brothers. Okay, that may be the case. You're right. But that's not for James Gunn to really worry about at this point in time. His focus is DC Studios and the DCU moving forward, not looking backward. He doesn't need to worry about what was successful. He needs to worry about what is going to be successful. So the idea and the fact that, we need to add this in because it was successful, that's not how that works. That's not how a newly established studio has to think. They have to think about, what do we think is going to be successful moving forward? And how is it going to fit in with our story moving forward? And I think that's where a lot of people, they want to try and kind of find ways they want to try and figure out ways that James Gunn is going to do things. And I say this all the time. It's kind of like people just want to know now. They want to know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, why it's going to happen. And they want to know now. And I get that. But don't you remember the time, I remember in 2012 watching The Avengers and that mid-credit scene, or was it the post-credit scene? I think it was post-credits. I don't remember if it was mid or post-credits, whatever it was, when Thanos first shows up and you first see Thanos and you're like, holy crap, you see Thanos. Now, a lot of people didn't know who it was. They just saw some big purple face guy. But those of us who knew that it was Thanos, for those of us who knew what that meant for the grand scheme of things, that there's this bigger ultimate threat in the universe, you knew that he was out there. And there's a possibility that it could be leading to something larger. And then, film after film, you would get little bits and pieces. and we never got the full story. And it's okay. You don't always need to know everything immediately. And that's kind of where we're at right now with DC and the DCU. We don't need to know everything right now. Things are going to be fed to us as we need to know. And I think it's just about being patient. It's about getting ready, getting excited. Yeah, we're going to have two. We're going to have an Elseworlds DC Batman. We're going to have DCU Batman. And honestly, the Matt Reeves Batman, who knows how long it lasts. We got the Penguin series coming out later this year. We got the Batman 2 probably coming out in a year or two. Maybe that's all we get. And that is very possible that could be all we get. Maybe we get the Batman 2, the Batman 3, and then that's it. Maybe the Batman 2 doesn't even happen. Who knows at this point? We don't even know that. Nothing is definite in Hollywood right now. So I think we all need to sit back, relax, take some time, chill a little bit. I don't know, what do you think? Are you somebody who thinks that Robert Pattinson should be the Batman in the DCU? Or do you think they should just take a step back? Do you think James Gunn is making the right move and saying, you know what, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to do what we think is going to be best for the DCU. Do you think Matt Reeves was right in saying, no, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to keep my Batman over here, do my own thing. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, because honestly, your comments are what matter most, right? They matter more than my comments, I think, maybe. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking out my ass right now. But let me know your thoughts. Make sure you hit that like button, hit subscribe. On my way to 500 subscribers, 140 away, 70 away. I don't know what it is. 100 and some away. I want to hit 500 by the end of March. So subscribe, share it with friends, all that jazz. With all that said, I'll catch you all later.